Good day. I am Heinrich H. Enriquez, and I will be presenting my paper on protecting Southeast Asia's seas, examining regional cooperation and combating piracy and robbery at sea. So, in the opening years of the century, fear of the piracy permeated in Southeast Asia. So, this region is strategically located between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, as well as between the continents of Australia and Asia. So the region is home to significant oceans, seas, and straits, which are form one of the busiest international sea lanes of communication. So over half the world's commercial shipping pass through the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, which provide the shortest sea route between Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So these are the most important shipping lines in the world, carrying approximately one quarter of all traded goods. So in the last years, with the increase in seaborne trade and shipbuilding tonnage worldwide, the amount of commercial traffic traversing the region's waterways has increased substantially. So, and it has resulted in the dramatic increase of piracy and robbery at the sea region. So, as COVID-19 pushed Southeast Asian countries further into economic desperation, the number of piracy and robbery at sea cases in Singapore Strait reached a half-decade high with 41 incidents reported between January and November 2021. So this accounts for 57% of the total numbers of reported incidents in Asia. So because piracy and robbery at sea are transnational in nature, it calls for states to work together to combat them. So a number of regional regimes, such as bilateral, multilateral, official, and unofficial, have emerged to address this cooperation issues, all of which are quite informal and lack binding quality. So because of these piratical acts that are complex in nature, it really calls for states to collaborate on a multilateral level and in a consistent and comprehensive manner. With this, my paper presentation aims to examine the effectiveness of this cooperation in Southeast Asia, namely the RIKA, Malacca Straits Petrol, and ASEAN Initiative. So by looking at its operational and strategic efforts in combating piracy and robbery at sea. So in this context, the concern is not just simply cooperation, but more of a strategic and operationalized security cooperation. So this paper aims to answer the following questions. First is, how do Southeast Asia address piracy and robbery at sea? And has regional cooperation in Southeast Asia managed to be effective in combating piracy and robbery at sea? So to start with my framework, this is all based on the literature review. So this paper will follow a conceptual framework incorporating and expanding the studies of Bateman, Bradford, Hack, and Agastya. So they said that effective cooperation in combating piracy and robbery at sea entails operational efforts, not just strategic level efforts. So thus, there's a need for cooperation in Southeast Asia to venture into operational and strategic security cooperation. So to expand Agastya's observation, a degree of dialogue is necessary to facilitate operational security cooperation, while Bradford has proposed that a method for determining whether a specific maritime security cooperation activities are effective is through operationalized security cooperation. So this kind of cooperation is a specific type and degree of cooperation in which policies addressing common threats can be carried out by mid-level officials of the states involved without immediate or direct supervision from strategic level authorities. So Bateman also added that an effective operationalized cooperation in the relatively confined waters of Southeast Asia should include arrangements such as information sharing, building situational awareness of what is happening at sea, data assessment, and intelligence briefing by combined teams of analysts, surveillance, and patrol, and then to provide an operational response to any suspicious activity. So, while for the strategic efforts, it is in the forms of dialogue that often generate outcomes in the form of statements, ranging from affirmation of the existing commonly agreed principles, pledges, or plans for further cooperation to definitive joint statements. So it generally takes the forms of routine meetings or workshops. My research also used a qualitative method called data collection and analysis, and a secondary method of data collection was used, which consists of books, journal articles, reports, documented government materials, and organizations, and internet sources. So to start with my discussion, so this section will briefly explain the cooperative activities taken by regional cooperations in order to address the problem of piracy and robbery at sea in Southeast Asia. So I will discuss various regional efforts of regional cooperation agreement against piracy and armed robbery against ships in Asia, for short RIKA. It is a cooperation with external actors. Malacca Straits Patrol, it is a quad cooperation in Southeast Asia, and the measures within the ASEAN Framework. So to start with, Malacca Straits Patrol is a quad cooperation and is one of the multilateral responses to combat piracy and robbery at sea. So this Malacca Straits Patrol is a series of practical cooperative measures implemented by Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and later joined by Thailand to ensure the security of the states of Malacca and Singapore. So the Malacca Straits Sea Patrol, so there's the MSSP, the Combined Maritime Air Patrols, or commonly known as the Eyes in the Sky, and the Intelligence Exchange Group. It comprises the Malacca Strait. So according to Bradford, MSP is Southeast Asia's first significant operationalized multilateral cooperation that has developed without the involvement of any additional regional partner outside Southeast Asia. So since then, the initiative has involved like structurally, culturally, politically, technologically, and relationally to become more effective in carrying out its broader mandate. So these stratified measures between the Malacca Straits and Singapore Straits coastal countries were undeniably a significant step forward in Southeast Asia's interstate cooperation to combat piracy and robbery at sea. So to date, they comprise one of the only coordinated operational military responses in existence. So the operational efforts entail activities of, as I mentioned earlier, is the Malacca Straits Sea Patrol. So in this, member states conduct coordinated patrols within their own waters and several control points. So they also have the Eyes in the Sky. It's the Combined Maritime Air Patrols to reinforce sea patrols with air surveillance using the Maritime Patrol aircraft. So with this, each aircraft has a combined maritime patrol team on board, and it comprises a military officer from each of the participating states. As a team, the CMPT establishes a comprehensive surface picture over the patrol area and broadcasts any suspicious contacts on designated radio frequency to ground-based agencies called the Monitoring and Action Agency. So it is established in each of the participating countries. So next is the Intelligence Exchange Group. It's the Malacca Straits Patrol Information System. So this was formed to support the sea and air patrols, leading to the development of an information sharing platform called the Malacca Straits Patrol Information System. So for the strategic efforts, it entails the activities of the Joint Coordinating Committee. They have these regular meetings to enhance the coordination and review the conduct of operations. So we have this annual meeting that seeks to strengthen information sharing linkages and enhance mutual understanding and collaboration between MSP members. So it is a commitment to quarterly exercises to sharpen information exchange processes, as well as an updated set of suspicious contact indicators to assist the investigation efforts of sea robbery accidents. Okay, moving on with the next regional cooperation is measures within the ASEAN Framework. So ASEAN has been committed to discussing issues related to maritime security and their meetings, and the forums that address the issue of maritime security will hopefully bring eradication of piracy. So forums such as the ASEAN Maritime Forum, ASEAN Regional Forum, and Maritime Security Experts Working Group are used as a tool to gain common understanding and discuss the issue transparently among the states and the region. So the ASEAN way became the foundation of the creation of mechanism, institution, and framework in which it facilitates the maritime security cooperation to combat piracy and robbery at sea. So first is ASEAN Maritime Forum or AMF. It is the only intramural ASEAN forum where maritime security issues such as piracy, but also other issues including the protection of marine environment, illegal fishing, maritime transportation, could be discussed comprehensively based on ASEAN principles. The ARF ISM, which was established in July 2008, it aims to facilitate clear dialogue concerning maritime security. So this dialogue includes, but is not limited to, piracy and armed robbery, smuggling of goods and people, as well as capacity building and cooperation. ARF also held workshops and seminars on capacity building. And recently, the ARF has noted the ongoing deliberation among the ASEAN navies in the view of operationalizing the guidelines for maritime interaction and efforts to strengthen cooperation in the area of piracy and robbery against ships under the ambit of the AMTs and other similar agreements such as the RIKA Act, which I will be discussing further later. As for the Maritime Security Experts Working Group, MSEWG, though still being more process-oriented, is more operational or outcome-oriented compared to the ARF and AMF, as the formal working group setting allows their members to quickly formulate plans of cooperation in multiple areas. So all in all, these dialogues are important in fostering trust and confidence among these regional states. So these qualities that are essential for a firm and robust cooperative platform. So if this engagement is maintained, Southeast Asia may well be on its way to establishing a key to operationalize and strategical security cooperation. So indeed, operational cooperation first requires robust dialogue process. So next is the RIKA app. So the RIKA app is the first regional government-to-government agreement to promote and enhance cooperation against piracy and armed robbery against ships in Asia. So the RIKA app agreement was launched in November 2006 with 14 Asian contracting parties, including North, Southeast, and South Asian countries. So today it has 21 contracting parties, including Europe, Australia, and the United States. ASEAN member states which participate in the RIKA are Brunei, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. All in all, the 8 Southeast Asian members of ASEAN. So under the agreement, RIKA is actively promoting cooperation among contracting parties for information sharing, capacity building, and cooperative agreements to prevent and suppress piracy and armed robbery against ships. So one of the key features of RIKA is information sharing through regional cooperation. So during the last 15 years since the inception of RIKA, the RIKA Information Sharing Center, ISC, has been making efforts to provide timely and accurate information on the incidents of piracy and robbery at sea to the contracting parties and maritime community at large. So RIKA has really established an effective information sharing mechanism. So the main source of this information is from the focal points of these 21 contracting parties who send incident reports through the Information Network System or IFN. So the key success factor of information sharing is to gather and provide accurate information promptly as much as possible. So furthermore, the capacity building measures of RIKA have largely really proven to be effective in tackling Southeast Asia's maritime piracy and robbery problems. So these capacity building projects are a good place for sharing best practices and experiences of the RIKA focal points, as well as nurturing closer working relationship and network among focal points. So at the 12th Governing Council meeting in 2018, the Council announced that the RIKA ISC has met the criteria to be a center of excellence for sharing, information sharing, and combating piracy and armed robbery against ships at sea. So while RIKA app has really this amazing advantages, there are some limitations in their capability. So their effectiveness remains limited to the seas of the contracting states. So the two main players in the region, namely Indonesia and Malaysia, it continues to refrain from ratifying the agreements, even as the attacks in the streets of this uh, are really high. So both countries currently limit their cooperation with RIKA to sharing information with the ISC and its focal points in the various RIKA member countries. So a great extent of the Malacca Strait lies within the territorial and archipelagic waters of Indonesia and Malaysia. Thence, discussion without the participating sovereign nations could be the reason why it would be less effective. So further, as mentioned earlier, also the two big pillars of RIKA, the information sharing and the capacity, is just a coordination agency which has been expected to be pursuant to the agreement. So therefore, even though RICAP ISC shares reports and attacks with the focal points in each party soon after receiving, taking action depends on the respective operation centers which has responsibility to dispatch these patrol ships. So particularly if the incident is transboundary, there could be time lags when coordinating operations. So as a regional measure, RICA does not really supersede the enforcement measurement of LOSOC. In line with this view, so the agreement does not really facilitate member states to seize these pirate ships in other states' territorial waters, because there would always be an issue of sovereignty. So today, the reports and activities of the center are really widely cited, and RICAP ISC is seen as an authoritative voice on the situation of piracy and robbery at sea against ships in Asia. So it continues to be a vital role to facilitate information sharing and collaboration between international navies, coast guards, and other maritime agencies to deal with the full range of piracy and robbery at sea in order to enhance maritime security in Southeast Asia region and also hopefully and beyond. So RICAP has since its establishment provided an excellent results, well underlined by the statistical data provided by their secretariat, evidencing that the cooperation has resulted in a more effective combating of piracy and robbery at sea. So the efforts and results of RICAP have rightly been recognized internationally, especially the International Maritime Organization. So nonetheless, RICA is really a valuable tool for fostering cooperation and coordination between states and combating piracy and robbery at sea in Asia, and particularly in Southeast Asia. So it is a formal institution to combat piracy and robbery at sea. It's not just a mere compilation of agreements and declarations that live on words but stop short of real action. So therefore, although RICA lacks robust enforcement measures, but their ability to enhance mutual trust and confidence between states may pave the way for stronger cooperation even to the future. So for the discussion, for the analysis, I would be comparing the measures within ASEAN, MSP, and RICA. So both MSP and RICA have been hailed to be effective in their ability to foster cooperation and coordination between states in combating piracy and robbery at sea, as seen in its operational and strategic activities measured within our framework that I have mentioned earlier. So furthermore, in the domain of maritime security, information operationalization is really important, and it refers to the process of analyzing this incoming information about the real or potential security threats and using that information to address security risk in real time. So both MSP and RICAF have been using this kind of technique. However, only MSP coordinates sea patrols while facilitating the sharing of information between ships and their naval operation centers of different countries. So naval patrols are only performed in SOMs, which remain coordinated rather than joint patrols. So meaning that hot pursuit into and patrolling of waters of neighboring countries was not really permitted. So
The ships and aircrafts of MSP can patrol international waters and occasionally fly over the territorial waters with proper permission. But no one has to set foot on the land of another country. So the lack of the boots on the ground makes this cooperation a much simpler affair. So it's out of the sight and out of the mind for the most people ashore. So going back to RIKA, although RIKA does this information operationalization, the report and attacks with the focal points in each party soon after receiving, and the action taken would depend on the respective operations center, which has responsibility to dispatch patrol ships. Additionally, scholars have really emphasized the most comprehensive regional anti-piracy institution so far is the RIKA, which had been initiated outside the confines of ASEAN. So RIKA represents more than a technical and operational cooperation agreement, but it is based on the construction of shared maritime situational awareness in Southeast Asia. Furthermore, MSP is also branded as the first significantly operationalized multilateral cooperation in Southeast Asia to develop without an extra-regional power or partner, I mean. So on the other hand, ASEAN initiatives have enhanced dialogue between member states, but have not resulted in actual measures to tackle piracy that involve all Southeast Asian countries. So there is still no dedicated body for tackling piracy and piracy only. So yes, the forums can be the piracy can be tackled in the forums, but it's only seasonal. So like for instance, ASEAN Maritime Forum, they did have a meeting with the topic of anti-piracy and counter-piracy only on 2012, 2017, 2019, but it is also always encompassed with other issues. So as we could see here, it is really natural to question whether ASEAN has a role in this initiative that affects all of the Southeast Asia. So among ASEAN institutions, maritime security cooperation and combating piracy and robbery at sea is largely dialogue-based in the form of routine dialogues and periodic thematic workshop that is designed to increase the capacity of these relevant state maritime security agencies. So despite these mechanisms, ASEAN has yet to take an integrated and coordinated approach to addressing this issue. So indeed, ASEAN still struggles to provide a coordinated response to regional crisis and a more technical approach to involving the majority or all Southeast Asian states is really needed. So it is therefore not really surprising that some member states have considered sub-regional maritime patrols more effective than the ASEAN mechanism. So for the conclusion, we could see here that there is a significant appetite that is now existing in Southeast Asia na it's not just for dialogue or on strategic level, but more for operational coordination and cooperation to deal this issue of piracy and robbery at sea. So to reiterate, a degree of dialogue is really necessary, still necessary to facilitate this operational cooperation. So anchored in the conceptual framework, I argue that the effective cooperation can only be attained if there is a presence of both strategic and operational efforts in combating this issue. So at the regional level, as we have discussed, we have these frameworks that they address this challenge. So we have the Quad cooperation of the Malacca Straits Patrol, a regional governance structure of ASEAN initiatives, and a cooperation with external actors, which is the RIKA app. So all in all, this paper clearly shows that Quad cooperation of MSP and cooperation with external actors of RIKA beneath the regional governance efforts of ASEAN has proven to be the most effective way of conducting operational and strategic activities, thus enabling effective cooperation in combating piracy and armed robbery at sea in Southeast Asia. The only handicap with the effectiveness of RIKA and MSP is that neither Indonesia nor Malaysia is parties to this agreement for the former, and the latter only involves Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand, and it only focuses on SOMs. So as observed, MSP and RIKA they appear to be effective because they comply to the framework that I have provided. However, their efforts are only limited to their contracting states. And ASEAN still need to have this technical, more operational approach to involve the majority, not just the majority, the all of Southeast Asian states. So thus, the current situation is really far from perfect, and there are definitely gaps since there is no single institutional measure that sufficiently covers all operational and strategic efforts of all states in the region. So this can only be achieved if the political environment in the region is more supportive. So those regional responses have yielded patchy at best outcomes as regional countries appear cautious when these issues such as comprising their sovereignty are necessary for more integrated management framework. So the discussion of Malacca Street's patrol and RIKA is not meant to sell it as a model example of effective cooperation, but simply an example of existing and enduring cooperation. So the very fact that MSP and RIKA were organized and are still extant when so few such international efforts exist in the ASEAN region is by itself remarkable. However, questioning its mission effectiveness is perfectly valid. While it did have great success reducing piracy, its effectiveness remains to its contracting states and does not encompass the whole of Southeast Asia. So despite ongoing incidents of piracy in Southeast Asia, these regional cooperation efforts are having genuine success at containing the issues through these significant strategic and operational efforts. However, there's still the need for a regional strategy that is strategic and operational that all Southeast Asian states would adhere to. So, instituting this regional cooperation will not be easy. Rather, an appreciation of strategic and operational consideration would provide a realistic basis upon which viable and meaningful building blocks for regional security can be constructed. So the region should pursue the common goal of strategic and operationalized maritime security with a suite of complementary tools and processes that integrate well and help fill gaps in the individual state's security postures and for the region as a whole. So that ends my presentation, and as shown are the references that I used for this paper. So thank you for making time to listen to my presentation.